balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here.
Welcome back, my friends. We are going to be exploring boundaries and energetics today, and I'm super excited to have Sara McCready back with us to explore this topic. I cannot wait to see what is unveiled in this conversation. Boundaries is something that has been so incredibly important on my personal journey, something that I've had to spend a lot of time working on, something I work with clients very heavily in. And Sara brings a really unique perspective and expertise that I haven't spent a lot of time in with the energetics focus. So I just am super excited to hear what she has to share with us today. If you missed the first episode Sara and I did together, make sure you go back and check that one out. That one is called Transformation from Toxic to Triumphant, and you do not want to miss it. It really lays some of the foundation that we're going to be expanding on even further today. But if you didn't catch that one and you're a rebel and you're starting with today's episode, that's okay too. Sara, welcome back. Do you want to give anybody who missed the first episode a brief introduction of who you are, what you do?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, Kayla. Thank you so much for having me back and continuing this conversation. Today's subject, like you said, is super deep, and we're going to have a lot of fun exploring a different aspect of boundaries today through the energetic body. So for those who are not familiar with me, my name is Sara McCready. My business name is Illuminated Joy, and I'm an intuitive mentor for women that have experienced a toxic relationship and are looking to move past the trauma, drama, and chaos of that toxic relationship so that they can experience peace, ease, and joy. And I do this through a one-on-one approach, through a mentorship program. And we talk about all of these things that Kayla and I are going to be exploring today and that we did in the last episode. And that is your healing journey, your emotional healing journey through your energetic body, learning to understand about your chakra system, learning to understand about your energetic body and how it directly impacts your physical body. I also experienced 4 separate toxic relationships over a 25-year period of my life. And it was the 4th and final toxic relationship that led to this breakdown for the breakthrough. And it was my emotional healing journey and coming into the understanding of the energetics and the energetic body in our physical world, how much more expansive life can be and how much more aware and balanced life can be when I started working with the energetic body. So that's who I am and what I do. And we're going to have a really great conversation today.
Yes, we are. Thank you for coming back and just continuing this conversation with me. I know when we had first talked, we briefly touched on this topic of boundaries, and I feel like even just that brief conversation expanded my personal practice of boundaries and being more aware of the different impacts that has. So I would love for you to just share with everybody kind of how you relate to boundaries in general. What's your definition that's kind of all encompassing of this?
Yeah. So, what I share with my clients and what I came to the conclusion of in my own world as well is that boundaries are a fence line. They are our personal rules that we declare to ourselves and, if necessary, to another. And they keep us safe emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, spiritually, and materially, as well as our time and energy. And so these are personal rules, if you will, that we adopt in order to keep us safe from manipulation, mental or emotional manipulation, but also to keep ourselves in integrity. So there's an expression that says boundaries are for us, they're not for the other people. And that's because it's really about keeping ourselves in integrity, keeping ourselves in alignment. When we have experienced codependency and those codependent programs and behaviors, we tend to be people pleasers and overgivers, and we're always overextending ourselves. When we learn about boundaries and start adopting and having and holding boundaries in our lives, we're moving out of that codependent behavior and moving more into that independent and interdependent way of being. So looking after ourselves, prioritizing ourselves, and not overextending in any way, shape, or form.
I love the emphasis on we do this for ourselves, and it's first the rules that we're making for ourselves. Because I think sometimes when you start talking about boundaries, it can be very other focused, and people want to draw the boundary, with a particular person, and that is part of it, right? Like you said, sometimes you're communicating those out, but it first has to take place within us. And I think that foundation is just so, so essential. How did you kind of come to this understanding of boundaries? Has this always been the way you related to it, or has this evolved?
Definitely not the way that I have always related to it. That was part of my, life lesson, if you will. The journey that I went on was lack of boundaries and not understanding what they were, not really even knowing how to implement them. I'm sure I have heard the word in the past and sort of thought I knew what it was, but it wasn't until I began my emotional healing journey and started to develop a new way of being, truly, after that fourth and final toxic relationship. It was through that journey that I began to understand the significance of boundaries. And so it has developed for me. It came through the self-reflection work that I was doing at the time, learning about codependency and how that was showing up in my life and how the lack of boundaries was showing up in my life, and learning to understand that, saying you have a boundary and then actually holding the boundary were two very different things. And so it was through that self-reflection work, looking back on my past, even in my corporate job that I had before doing the work that I do today, I recognized the lack of boundaries that I had at that time. And what that looks like in the workplace is you are giving more hours than you're being paid for. You're taking on more projects than what is really in your scope of work. You're overextending yourself in time and energy. And so starting to see how that pattern of lack of boundaries was showing up is what moved me in the direction of recognizing that it was time to learn what boundaries were and begin to implement them in my life. And so when I work with clients, it's very much a progressive learning experience. This isn't something you just wake up one day and say, I'm going to have boundaries and that's it. I wish it worked that way, but there is like an actual learning curve to adopting boundaries into your life. And again, it goes back to they're for you, not the other people. And so one of the things that I actually, I'm going to probably segue now into the energetics, if that's okay.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I found was that for myself and for my clients, I wasn't able to really understand or grasp what this boundary business was all about. And when I tried to teach my clients what boundaries are from a logical perspective, from a cognitive perspective, there wasn't a connection because it's something, my clients are like me. So they'd gone their whole lives without boundaries, as had I. And it's just something that doesn't land. Like when you say, okay, it's time to learn about boundaries and we're going to start creating them for you so you can implement them, their eyes glaze over, as did mine. So what I found was, this is how I started incorporating the energetics into my work. I am a Reiki Master Teacher. I didn't say that in my introduction. So the energetics is also very much a part of everything that I do, my way of living, my way of being, and how I teach and mentor my clients everything is from the perspective of the energetic body and the chakra system. So what I recognized was when I started talking to my clients about their energetic bubble. So we all have an aura. I think that's language that most people are familiar with. And when we start working with our aura or our energetic body, we begin to see things in our physical world shift. So what I started doing with my clients to get them to relate to the concept of boundaries was to start working on this aura or energetic boundary. And what that means is that we started implementing energy practices for our energetic body. And energetic practices looks like being mindful of your aura and setting intentions of the type of energy that you will allow in and out of your energetic field or aura. So when we think about the bubble around us, the energetic body around us, we can visualize, like I said, this giant bubble. And the energetic body or aura extends about 6 feet out from arm's length, up, down, and all around us. And when we connect into that energetic body and our chakra system, we start to notice differences in our physical world. So back to the energy and setting the intentions for the energy. One of the practices that I teach my clients is setting the intention for what they will and will not allow energetically in and out of their space or their bubble. So we all know about personal space, right? Like that, is usually arm's length from us is our personal space. And we can feel when someone has invaded our personal space. If someone's like coming in close to us without invitation, we feel that. It makes us uncomfortable because they're invading our energetic space and they're doing so without permission. So one of the things that I work on is starting to connect my clients in with their energetic body and teaching them how to set that intention. So what I did in the early days with my energetic boundaries was start to set the vibration that I wanted to operate from and that I wanted to attract into my world. So everything that I end up doing with the energetics, it usually involves some sort of little rhyme or mantra. And so what came to me when I started working with my energetic bubble was I only allow love, light, joy, and grace in and out of my space. And the reason why it was love, light, joy, and grace is because those are high vibrational energies or emotions. So I wanted to work with the energy of love, the energy of light, the energy of grace and joy. And I wanted to work with people that also had that love, light, joy, and grace energy and communicate with that type of person or people. And when you set that intention for your energetic body, your aura, your energetic field, your personal boundary area, when you set the energetic intention to be a high vibration, anything that doesn't match that vibration, so anyone that is a little bit angry, carrying around shame, being that frustrated, irritated energy or emotion, anyone who's operating from that energy isn't going to resonate with you. Your energetic intention is going to repel their lower vibrational frequency.
I love this just expansion beyond the way that we typically talk about and think about boundaries, especially coming from like mental health and psychology background when it is very logical and it is hard to grasp. And it's honestly bringing up some of the things in my own journey with boundaries, just listening to you, because I've been on probably over a decade long journey where I realized there was, codependency in my initial family unit, and that was showing up in other adult relationships, and, had to start doing that work for myself. And there was the same disconnect that you're talking about, that you experience yourself, that you've seen with your clients, where it was like, I wanted to draw a boundary. I understood it with my brain, but there was guilt and shame around some of it still. It wasn't until I started to bring, my heart into it and really release all of that, that I started to feel in healthier connection with others and was able to enter into those, reciprocal relationships and settings. So I think this is why, right? It's an energetic shift as well as a relational shift. How do you help people, I guess, really start to see it from both sides, to be able to draw that energetic boundary and to understand it from that lens, but then to also bring it to practice in their relationships?
Yes. So what I've discovered is that when you start working with the energetic body in the way that I've just described, and this is like one of many things that I teach my clients, when you start working with the energetic body, you start noticing I want to say reaction, but the changes in the people that you relate to in the physical world. So people at work, people at home, your family, wherever it may be, when you start working from setting this intention for your energetic bubble, declaring what your boundaries are to yourself, then you start to see it reinforced in the physical. And when you're getting that physical world feedback, so someone's might be, walking towards you in an angry fashion, and then suddenly they switch directions. When you start seeing like the actual physical evidence of the energetic work that you're doing, it just continues to reinforce that, oh, this is how I'm going to start practicing my boundaries. It gives the client a really safe way to start to begin to accept that boundaries actually are healthy, and that they don't need to feel yucky and be scary and be uncomfortable and all those things that you were just describing. Because when we approach boundary creation and holding boundaries from our logical mind, when we first start doing that, and we have not done that previously in our lives, it's super uncomfortable. You end up with some anxiousness, and it's almost like training at the gym, or for a sport or something. Like you just feel like this, you hype yourself up, and then you hold a boundary if you're in a group or with a particular person at work or at home, and then you walk away from the experience, and it's like you have to lay down because you're completely exhausted, because you've exerted yourself holding this boundary that's new to you. When we approach it from the energetic understanding, the energetic body, it's not that intensity. It takes the charge, it takes the mental charge off of creating and holding boundaries, because you are using your energetic body, and then you're witnessing by people's reactions and responses the changes that you wish to see happen. Meaning, if someone is being aggressive with you, they simmer down because you're holding the energetic of intention of, I only allow love, light, joy, and grace into my life. And so when you're seeing that actual response materialize, it just reinforces what you're doing, and it helps to keep you going at it and then expanding with it. I had one client last year. It was like maybe 2 or 3 months into the mentorship program. And she was, she'd been preparing for a wedding. So there was like many family and friend things happening. And she was starting to declare boundaries for herself, but doing it from the energetic body. And in one of our sessions, she said to me right off, as soon as we got on the call, oh my goodness, boundaries aren't scary, they're fun. She had also, like you described, Kayla, and like I've shared, gone her whole life without boundaries, and had started to notice, being the doormat, overextending herself, people pleasing, overgiving. And she really wanted to, and I say this without pretension, but be served on the day of her wedding. She didn't want to be catering to everybody. She wanted to like enjoy her wedding from that place of independence and interdependence rather than worrying about everybody and everything. She wanted to be able to be present and show up for her wedding. And to do that, she recognized that she needed to start implementing boundaries. And so it was through that work of the energetic body that she was able to start recognizing that people were responding to her differently. She was responding to them differently because she was feeling that centeredness, that groundedness. And she was able to communicate her boundaries, whereas she hadn't been able to do that in the past. And so this is the beauty of working from the energetic body first before the mental body, is that it helps you build up the confidence. It gives you that sense of safety, and you're getting like instant feedback, real-time feedback. So you can see, hey, this is working. Okay, I'm going to keep doing this.
Okay, there are so many things I want to unpack from that. First off, I just need to highlight the power of that shift from boundaries aren't scary, boundaries are fun. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say boundaries are fun before.
Yeah.
So I think that is such a powerful testimony to doing this approach where you're starting with the energetics. And I wish I had known this 10 years ago, because I got into some of this, later on after I had struggled through the mental, and logical and the guilt and the shame and all of that stuff, and the exactly like you were explaining, like the building strength over time to be strong enough to hold the boundary,
Yes.
And it wasn't until I started getting into, yoga and meditation practices, and I have worked with, some Reiki teachers, and not at all to the extent of your knowledge, but when I started to dabble into that realm more was when it became easier, and I didn't quite understand the connection back when I was first beginning that exploration. But it sounds like when you're doing this first, the logical can come and you can integrate it, but you've already got this strong foundation. And I want to dig in a little bit to boundaries are fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Help me and the
Yes.
listeners. How do we make boundaries fun? How do we shift the way we're thinking about it and exercising it so that it's an enjoyable practice?
Yes. Yes. And that lit me up when she said that. I was so excited for her and for the conversation that we were having inside the mentorship program, because it just was such a revelation to have a client reframe it that way, and give, I want to say, like proof positive that there was really strength in working from the energetic body first. So how she went about doing that was because she had also been doing yoga and meditation and stuff. So she already had a foundation around her energetic body. So when I shared this perspective with her and this approach, she was really eager to try it to see what the results were going to be. So when she first started trying to implement boundaries with her friends, and what that looked like was declining invitations because she would say yes to everything. You know, that's part of the overextending. It was also, overgiving in the friendship. So not necessarily a reciprocal exchange of energy or time. She was always the one overgiving and overextending herself. And so when she tried to implement boundary by saying, no, not today, meaning, no, I'm not coming out, or no, that doesn't work for me, or no, I can't come to your event, whatever. She was doing it from the logical mind. And so it felt heavy and it felt uncomfortable. And it created this resistance to continuing to hold a boundary or state a boundary. And so when she adopted working from the energetic body and she set the intention for what she chose to have energetically be in and out of her aura or energetic field, it began to show up in the conversations that she was having with people. She was able to say no, thank you, in a different way. It was more gentle. It was received differently. When we have an energy of ease, of love, of authority or sovereignty, as I call it, behind our intention. And when I say intention, I mean our no thank you or whatever our boundary is. When we have that energy of ease and love and sovereignty or authority, we shift how it's received by the other person. Versus when we state a boundary, our no thank you, not today, when we state it from, oh my God, this is really hard and my stomach's turning and I really don't want to say no, but I know I need to say no and it's awful, but I'm going to do it anyway. And here it goes. No, I'm not coming to your event. When we do it that way, from that place of fear and angst, it lands very differently with the other party or person than when we say, no, I'm not able to come out to your event this weekend. Thank you for inviting me, though. I hope to catch you next time. That is a completely different energy when we're doing it from this space and place of love, light, joy, and grace and sovereignty. I think the distinction is knowing what your deal breakers are, and I'm kind of introducing a little bit of a different topic here, but knowing what your deal breakers are versus your boundaries. When you are solid in what deal breakers are for you and what your hard no's are, you're able to assert that boundary with authority rather than from angst. And authority doesn't mean that you're that prickly, the electric fence where people are like putting their hand on you and they're getting electrified. It's just such certainty because it's coming from that place, like you said about your heart space. It's coming from that place of complete certainty and conviction of knowing who you are and what you will and won't be able to do. So that's the shift from scary to fun. because you're coming at it from the energy of love, light, joy, and grace, or peace and ease, or certainty, and it's received completely differently. So the response that you get back is, oh, okay, rather than, but you said you were going to come and I don't understand. And why
Mm-hmm.
aren't you going to be there? And so like it changes absolutely everything about the conversation. So that's the difference between how it can shift from scary to fun.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like a lot just even clicked into place as I'm like reflecting back on the last 10 years listening to you, like that's exactly what was happening here. But
Yeah.
it's when you're coming from that place of energetic ease, and I think this even ties back into our last conversation when we were talking about self-worth and knowing
Mm,
what you're worthy of, and like you said earlier, being in integrity, like all of this intertwines so that
yeah.
these aren't so heavy. It feels easy because you know what you do and don't want. And I remember when I started to draw boundaries without the guilt, and it was just like, no, I don't want to do that. And I have no excuse why. Like I didn't need to make up a reason why I couldn't do it. I just felt like doing nothing instead. Like I have plans with myself, and I didn't feel guilty at all, but it took me a long time to get to that place because there were years before
Mm,
that where it was like, oh no, they need this thing from me. And technically I could do it, but this is my time. And then when you do actually violate your own boundary and you do the thing, then you create all kinds of other codependent dynamics. So you feel like
right.
this is just, it's making so much sense to me. And okay, so back tracing just a little bit, you mentioned that she had been working with you for a few months before she came to this
Mm-hmm.
place.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to keep kind of expanding on her experience, but I do think this is a
Mm,
really powerful,
yeah.
um, personal story of somebody working with this energetically. But what were the steps, the foundation that had to be laid before that kind of helped her break through to that point? What kinds of things do you do
Mm-hmm.
with your clients to start really making this approach feel feasible and more
Yeah.
accessible?
Yeah. Um, I I have probably never thought about it from that perspective. But the first thing that jumped into mind as you were asking that question, Kayla, is we have to get in our bodies first.
Mm,
The very first thing I do with my clients is we get back in our bodies because we have spent so much time outside our bodies.
mhm.
And what I mean by that is when we've experienced trauma, whether it's capital T trauma or little t trauma, and I think maybe we talked about this in the first episode, possibly. Regardless of how that trauma was experienced, we end up doing what I call ejecting out of our bodies, and we're not present. So we're in an experience, but we're not really there.
Mhm.
And when you're living life like that, you're not in your body. You have emotionally detached, and energetically also you've detached. It's like you're a balloon and you're just kind of floating through your life, and you're having experiences, but you're not really connecting to those life experiences. So the very, very, very first thing I do with any client is we spend about a month getting back into our bodies.
Mm,
And that is how we connect into our energy. And so, what that looks like is we learn about regulating our nervous system, and we learn about the energy behind nervous system regulation. So, a little bit of learning about the main 7 chakras and how they relate to the physical body. We learn about how to start to identify what your triggers are so that you're able to shift them before you eject from your body. Or if you have ended up ejecting, you bring yourself back in.
mm.
It's really that centeredness and that groundedness. So, as you were describing, trying to do things from the logical mind, the mental body, was very different from once you started practicing yoga and meditation
Yes.
and moving into your heart space. So it's really about learning practices. So there's tools and practices that I teach my clients, but they're tied into learning about your energetic body. So breath work, learning to do that belly breathing. And again, the things that tie into regulating your nervous system. So that's really probably the very first thing that happens. And it's
Yeah.
after that that we're able to start talking about what's yours and what's not yours, meaning what's your responsibility versus what is other people's responsibilities. So I have this diagram that I share, and I've seen it floating around socials for a number of years now. And it's a diagram of an inner circle and an outer circle. And the inner circle is everything you're responsible for: your words, your actions, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your consequences to your actions. And what's not your responsibility are other people's thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, and consequences to their actions. And so that would be the second part, is starting to identify what is your responsibility. Mm-hmm. Getting back in your body, getting grounded, getting centered, starting to identify what your triggers are so that you can move yourself back into centeredness if you become triggered, regulating your nervous system, understanding what is your responsibility, because part of the codependent behaviors and programming means that we are always busy operating on the outside of that circle, meaning we're operating in everybody else's responsibilities rather than ours. And then number 3 is when we can start connecting into our energetic body and implementing our energetic boundaries and seeing that materialize in the physical.
That is such a beautiful breakdown. And I love that you started with getting back into your body, because that is so key, and something our just kind of Western society in general isn't great about supporting people in that journey. But that makes so much sense too. So, I mean, I mentioned before, for me, it really was, yoga and meditation practice that shifted stuff for me, that allowed me to start interacting with the world from a different place. And I think it's because, I was doing that work to get back in my body. I was becoming aware of my body for the first time. I was
For the first
recognizing,
time.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
that's the way it is with myself and all my clients. It's the first time that you've gotten back into your body.
Well, and our bodies
Yes.
so often, even as women, I think, are unsafe places. And so this dissociation with the body and not being in the body is so often like a protective response. And so it's kind of scary, and there's a lot you have to work through when you start to reconnect with that. But it's so, so powerful. Aside from, I know you mentioned breath work and obviously yoga, and there are these, things that people know about. What are some, I guess, key practices that are just really easy for someone to start with when they're starting to want to reconnect with their body, with their breath? Where are some good starting points?
So a few things that I work on is having that awareness and doing hourly or multiple times a day check-ins. And I teach my clients to start asking, what do I need in this now moment? When we start asking ourselves, what do I need in this now moment? And we actually build a list of things that they can reach for. So I model this after the HALT acronym, HALT, which is, I think they teach this in the 12-step program. Never get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Yeah.
So I model it after that. And we actually build our list of resources from the HALT acronym. So stopping and asking yourself, what do I need in this now moment? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And then taking immediate action on whichever one or ones of those is your response, whatever is more true for you in that moment. Yeah, I'm like really hungry. And then realizing, oh crap, I haven't eaten since breakfast and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course I'm hungry and I'm probably thirsty too. And so stopping whatever you're doing and taking time to get some food into your system. If it's lonely, you're reaching out to a friend. You've got a list of people that are safe for you to connect with. If it's tired, taking a nap. And if it's angry, then you're going to take some time to self-soothe. You're going to go for a walk. You're going to do some breath work. You're going to give yourself a timeout, maybe do a little meditation. And so what I teach my clients is the other resources that they can use, which is meditation, as you've mentioned, frequencies. I introduce my clients to frequencies, or as we call them today, binaural beats.
Mm-hmm.
Find them on YouTube or Spotify. And sometimes you just need a few minutes to listen to those binaural beats or frequencies. I know for myself, when I was in the thick of it, that I was working in an office at the time, I would run a particular frequency that really felt good to my body. I would run that from my computer speaker, basically, on low volume throughout the day. What are some of the other things? Those are like the major one, is really just starting to take that time to ask yourself, what do I need in this now moment? That's really the key to starting to identify that you need to prioritize yourself first in order to be able to give to others.
Yeah. And it brings you back to that physical, emotional, and social needs that are really biological, like things that if we aren't meeting these needs, we aren't going to be listening to our bodies. We're not going to want to be in our bodies. It's going to be really hard if we aren't honoring those basic needs. And this is something I spend so much time in because it's hard for a lot of people who have these like habits and behaviors and patterns to even get in connection with their own needs. So I love this idea of an hourly check-in because it puts some structure into it. Because if it's just, oh, start to pay attention to what you're needing, that's like a foreign language.
Yes. Well, and particularly as you're moving through the emotional recovery journey and starting to move out of those codependent programs and behaviors, asking yourself, what do I need in this now moment? Even that in itself is a foreign concept. And the reason why I have structured it with my clients to do an hourly check-in, or at least, morning, noon, and night kind of thing, is because like you said, it's just not even on our radar to do that. We're so busy giving to everybody else and everything else that we are the very last person on the list that we ever check in with.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really about flipping that paradigm so that you are the first person that you check in with. And again, when you start down that path of checking in with yourself first, filling up your cup first, then you start to see how much more energized you are, and you start to feel it as well. And so you're able to give from overflow rather than depletion. And it's a totally different experience when you're giving from overflow versus when you're giving from depletion.
Absolutely. Yeah, it changes everything because I think we've somewhere along the way, many of us have got the message that if you are taking care of yourself first, that it's selfish. If you're not, though, like you said, the quality of what you can offer others is so depleted, and it harms that relationship on all ends. It harms your relationship with yourself. You aren't a self person or a safe person for yourself if you aren't recognizing and honoring your own biological, social, emotional needs and giving yourself permission to meet those. And Yeah, this is just such powerful work. Okay, I want to ask a couple of follow-up questions. So the first one, because sometimes I get ahead of myself and ask 6 questions at once. The first one is, when you're in a workplace in particular, what are
Mhm.
some practices that can be useful? I know you mentioned the binaural beats, maybe taking some time away. Those are all very
Yeah.
practical. Are there other things that people can do,
Mm.
especially I think when people find themselves in toxic workplace situations
Yeah.
that aren't able to leave yet, maybe? How can they care for themselves and do some of this work around that environment?
Yeah. So I will tell you exactly what I did. That was a total game changer. So also, as the fourth and final toxic relationship was winding down, I also discovered I was in a highly toxic work environment. So both things were happening at the same time. And so my level of anxiousness was above and beyond anything I had ever experienced. And what I learned to do for myself was to give myself permission to move away from my desk. I had been an employee that sat at her desk all the time and even ate her lunch at her desk. And so I had to start shifting how I was operating in order to give my nerves and my brain and my body a little bit of ease.
Mm.
And so the frequencies were on all the time when I was in the office. I would take an hour to walk at lunch. I got outside, even in the wintertime, I would get outside. That was such a crucial part of starting to help my body and my brain, was getting that fresh air.
Mm.
And of course, eating. I had recognized that I had not been eating fruit, and I had eliminated an entire food group from my menu, from my diet. And so introducing fruit back into my diet, increasing my water intake. When we are stressed like that, when we're experiencing trauma, ongoing trauma and toxicity, we are naturally more dehydrated than normal because of the elevated levels of cortisol. So increasing my water intake and adding electrolytes to my water.
Mm.
I learned a technique called the thymus tap, which is also an energetic technique that I teach my clients. That's another one that goes on the list. And the thymus tap is it is actually a nervous system regulation. It's a point just below the hollow of your throat and below the middle of your rib cage, the peak of your breast area. You can run your fingers along that part of your chest, and you'll see that the bones protrude out, and that is your cage. It's your ribs actually protecting the thymus gland. And so this is a traditional Chinese medicine tapping point. And so taking 2 fingers and tapping on the thymus gland and repeating, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe.
Mm.
And that actually gets you to drop back into your body. So I would do that repeatedly. The other thing I learned was heel rocks. And that's literally, it would get me to stand up out of my chair at my desk, and you're just rocking back and forth on your feet, and rocking back onto your heels and then forward
Mm.
onto the balls of your feet, and back on your heels, forward onto the balls of your feet. And that also helped do a little bit of nervous system regulation. And setting boundaries about the amount of time that I was going to be in the office. So I started, my work day ended at 5. And so I would start honoring that work boundary, the hours of work. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was kind of like the gist of it. And so these are the tools that I teach to my clients because they are that vitally important. And they are things that you can do in any environment, but particularly when you're in the office, they're not obtrusive. Like nobody will notice that you're tapping your chest saying, I am safe, I am safe, I am
Right.
safe. And then the other thing that I would do is I would go to the bathroom if I needed to, like just to go to the stall and do some breaths and just give myself a minute to breathe.
Yeah, just to be with yourself for a
Yeah,
second in a different
yeah.
environment where the computer's not in front of you. And yeah, those are so powerful. And it's so interesting to me because I feel like regardless of the modality and the expertise, a lot of these kind of nervous system regulation things we've maybe heard of, or they've been advertised in pulp culture around psychology and workplace well-being. But when you're actually observing what's happening in workplaces for people, especially in toxic workplaces, these things are not happening. People are not honoring their work boundaries. They're not taking a second for themselves to regulate their nervous system. And it's such an incredibly painful place to be in, and so many people are there right now. So I just
Mm-hmm.
thank you for just expanding on all of these and really making it accessible to start to do some of this energy work and some of this nervous system regulation. And if you're listening and you're in this place, you're in one of these situations right now, giving yourself permission to do these things, starting wherever feels accessible to you and then expand on that. Like, I feel like that's part of the hurdle, right? Is just giving ourselves that
Mm-hmm.
permission. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
just getting started. And that's why these are simple, 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 simple. And as I said, you can do them anywhere. But they allow you to get a little moment, or yes, a moment of reprieve where you can just take a breath. Because if you can get yourself to just take a breath, then you can take another and then another. And then you're able to move yourself back into that centeredness, and you're releasing a little bit of the anxiousness that's occurring because of whatever experience you're having in the workplace or wherever you may be.
Mm.
So keeping it simple is hugely important, especially nowadays. Like you said, when things are overly complicated and extremely stressful, you want to be able to support yourself, and you want to do that in a way that you're going to continue to do it so that it's sustainable. And so simple exercises or techniques or tools, however you want to label them, are important to have in your toolkit today.
Yes. Okay. And this kind of leads perfectly into the other thought that I was having, which everything that you've shared today, it's really bringing up that you cannot have self-care, self-love without this, without these boundaries around your relationships, your energetics, your physical body, your needs, all of this. And I'm wondering, I know when we had first talked, you had given me a suggestion of a practice I could do as kind of like an energetic cleansing after being around heavy intensity
Mm.
emotions. What are some things that people can do kind of on that realm as far as when maybe it's the end of the day and they're doing their nightly routine, or the beginning of the day and they're preparing? Are there some rituals they can kind of build in to existing routines with some different intentionality that can help with maintaining this energetically?
Yes. Absolutely. This is a fun one. But before I get into that one, I just want to address the topic of self-care. That was such a great point that you made about none of this can happen if you're not implementing the self-care practices. I like to call it soul care rather than self-care. When we are approaching it from the perspective of soul care, it makes sense that we're looking after our energetic body and putting it first versus the self-care, which has somewhat gotten a bad rap a little bit in that
Yes.
it's more limited. So the term self-care is more limited to the physical body.
Mm.
When we talk about soul care, we're talking about literally your soul, but we're also talking about the mental, emotional, and physical body. And so all of these things that I've shared today really are part of your soul care practices and tools. And so a way to manage your energy at the end of the day, if you're in a toxic work environment or you've been with family or friends that are a little bit more heavy energetically, is to what I call manage your energy hygiene. So just like we brush our teeth and wash our face every morning and every night, we also need to wash our energy. And so it's really just about having a quick shower. It's not like a full body doing the hair and all the rest of it. This literally is rinsing off in the shower with, and this is a key word that you use, Kayla, with the intention of rinsing off the heavy energy. So another mantra that, or little rhyme that came through for me in the early days when I started practicing these tools was, with this water I wash all negativity off, down the drain into the earth for Mother to clear, heal, and transmute the dirt. And so Mother refers to Mother Earth. And transmute means we're transforming that lower, denser energy into love, light, joy, and grace, into the higher, lighter vibrational frequencies. So having a practice of energetic showers is a really great way. Water is one of the highest vibrations on the earth plane. And so it helps us clear our energetic field, our aura, our energetic body, literally.
Yes. I love that. It's something that I've been practicing since we last spoke, and it really does make such a difference. And I'm someone who has like, I mean, I think all humans, we have this affinity for water, right? Like you said, this is an energetically charged, gift that we have access to. And I've always been nourished by being in large bodies of water and showering and all of these things. But when you add a layer of intentionality around it, it just amplifies that positive
Yes,
impact. Yeah.
that's exactly it. And that's the whole premise behind anything to do with the energetic body and energy work, is the intention. It's what intention do you have behind? And that is what propels the energy. It's your intention.
Yes. Okay. And then the last thing I just want to comment on, just to thank you for sharing, was soul care. I am going to have to steal that. I
Absolutely.
love that. I don't know how
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before, but I love that so much. And that is really the task here, right? Especially the type of people listening to this podcast, the type of people I tend to attract into my world are people that
Mhm.
we want something soulful. We
Yeah.
want to care for all of the realms of our being. And what better way to do that than to even change the language we're using so that it's not so muddy with some of the things that society has put on it. So I love that.
Correct. Yes. Soul care
Mm.
is the new self-care.
Ah, the transcended self-care.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, before we wrap up, is there any like final thoughts on this topic? I know we're going to have you back one more time to talk about just really digging into some of the nuances of chakras and just diving even deeper into this energetic work. We kind of had an intro session today, but as far as this topic goes, boundaries and energetics, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
I'm just taking a pause here to feel into that question. Of the tools that I've shared today, using them individually one by one, rather than trying to take them all on and using them all at once. Take your time and work with them individually, one at a time, and then build your practice from there. And that is what's going to make it sustainable, and it's going to make you continue to lean into these practices.
Yes. I I'm so grateful for you for coming back on today for this conversation. It's been incredibly enlightening for me. I love being on this healing journey myself and being able to have conversations with people like you and constantly expanding my own understanding of my own journey and the deepening that can happen in my own practice and that I can then offer to my clients as well. So I just have so much gratitude for you coming on and sharing with us and helping us really break down some of the nuance around boundaries because this is something so many people struggle with. And I think this is going to make it more accessible and hopefully more easeful for people to start to do this work. So I have, yeah, nothing but gratitude for you. Thank you so much, Sara. For everybody that's listening, take Sara's advice and just pick one thing from what she shared today, one thing that sounded interesting to you, that resonated with you, and give it a try. Don't leave it in the car or your walk or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Bring it into practice somewhere and see what happens. I am excited to meet with you again, Sara. And until then, I hope that everybody just takes radically good care of their souls. And I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Kayla.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.